Okay, hello everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to this August NAV Skills webinar. Thank you for attending, especially considering this is summer period. Today we have Tobias Fenster from Axians in Germany, and as I told Tobias, this is probably one of the most selfish webinars I have ever organized. Tobias actually dived into a subject that I had on my bucket list, and immediately when I read his blog about creating Visual Studio Code extensions, I sent him an email asking if he wanted to do a webinar. So before I give word to Tobias, a couple of housekeeping things. This webinar will be recorded, as you are used to from us. You can view the past webinars on our YouTube channel. The URL is right here. And we announce the new webinars on our website. Let me grab the website. On navskills.com/webinars, you can actually view the webinars which are upcoming. Next week we have PowerShell 101 with nobody less than Waldo. And then I'm going on vacation, so no webinars. And then after my vacation, there is working with Azure Functions and VS Code with Vyacheslav Babic. As always, we are looking for content and speakers. If you think you have something to share, don't hesitate and be like Tobias and share what you know. If you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/BrammelDS, you can actually view the past webinars. We are now at more than 800 subscribers. Pretty proud of that. Even my 13-year-old daughter thinks that's a pretty decent audience for a YouTube channel. If you have any questions, type them into the GoToMeeting questions window. I will be moderating this webinar. If I think it's a question we should ask ahead, then I will do it. Otherwise, I'll keep it to the end. Of course, thanks to the sponsor of these webinars, Liberty Grove Software. We have an hour for this webinar, but we may run a little bit over time, but we will make sure that the questions are answered before the top of the hour, and then everybody who is interested can stay after that. So with this, I'm going to change presenter. I'm going to make Tobias presenter, and Tobias, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me, and yeah, welcome from my side as well. You should see my presentation now. First of all, I want to do a quick introduction. As Mark already said, I'm Tobias Fenster. I'm CTO for Axios Infoma. We are actually a German NAV partner, but part of a French company network, which explains the kind of unusual mixture of languages or names that we have. We work mainly for the public sector and do have more than 1,000 customers on the same solution, so the almost exact same code base for all of our customers. We currently are on NAV 2017 and actually had the first productive installation worldwide as part of the TAP program last year, and are currently in the rollout.
I can't see your screen yet.
Okay. So let me see.
Maybe it's me.
Let me try again. It's better now? Okay, perfect.
Yep, that's you. I can see you now.
So, okay. Fortunately, there's nothing on that slide that I didn't say, so you can just read through what I already said. We're currently in the process of creating our own Dynamic 365 for Finance app, so this is why we are actually working with VS Code. My personal background is one as a Java and C# developer, and because of that, I still do some things outside the NAV universe, which brought me into contact with VS Code a bit earlier than NAV, working with .NET Core and ASP.NET Core, and had never any need for an extension, to be honest, because there's a very rich ecosystem of extensions already in place. But because AL is quite new to the show, I felt that there is something that maybe needs to be done. It's a small thing that I'll show you later, but as it is quite easy to create your own extensions, that really can be interesting. Okay, what we're going to do is I'll show you how you can get from an idea for a VS Code extension to an actually delivered VS Code extension. What do we need to do? How do we need to do it? Not so much why are we going to do that. What I mean with that is that I'll explain the basic idea, but I want to focus mainly on how do you get things done, what do you need to do, what do you need to run, and not so much the actual extension, because that's not going to do too much. What I want to do is also go through all the steps and show you a bit of the, so to speak, theory in the beginning and then actually do them. What I have planned is the one thing that I've already published on the marketplace. It's a simple extension that allows you to run or publish and run objects in VS Code, because one of the actually quite few things that I liked in C-side was the ability to select an object and then just run it. And that's no longer possible as easily in VS Code. So I decided to try to find out how difficult it would be to rebuild something similar. And actually it was quite simple, as I'll show you. The agenda will be, we're going to use a tool called Yeoman, which I'll explain later, to generate the basic code, so we don't have to do too much plumbing, so to speak. Then we have the actual extension coding, where we build the actual code that is doing what we want it to do. Then there's the creation of a private access token in the Visual Studio Online account, which we need to be able to publish to the marketplace. And in the end, we're going to publish the extension through a tool called VSCE, which actually is doing the publishing. And then we're going to use it in VS Code. So this really should be an end-to-end demo from an idea to actually using it in VS Code. And then there's the optional stuff, as Mark mentioned. If we are done earlier, then we can look into how are we going to publish our code to GitHub for those who maybe haven't done that before or are interested in doing that. So let's go right into it. I've mentioned some things that you might be familiar with, which actually was my main problem when preparing this webcast. How much do you already know, or how much don't you know? So I try to go through all of this quite quickly, so that whoever knows it isn't too bored, and if you don't know it yet, you still get the idea. And there's a tool called Yeoman. I click on that link, then you should hopefully see it. It's a tool which allows you to generate code, mainly, as you can see, for modern web apps. So this is into Bower and JavaScript and Node.JS and that stuff. And we can also use it for building our Visual Studio Code extensions. Actually, this is the tool that Microsoft tells you to use, because Microsoft themselves have built a generator. You can see that here as well. And this generator is built on top of Yeoman to just generate the base code for VS Code extensions. Yeoman is built on Node.JS. Node.js is an open source cross-platform server-side engine for JavaScript, which means that we have something in place to run JavaScript code without a browser, as you kind of usually did this until a couple of years ago. And then there's NPM, which is a package manager for Node.js. This is part of Node.js and quite easy to use. And because of the cross-platform and easy nature of both Node.js and NPM, Yeoman is built on top of this. So what we're doing in the end is we're using a code generator, which is built on the JavaScript platform and packages to generate our extension code for VS Code. A side note, what we are actually generating is TypeScript, an object-oriented superset of JavaScript, and the father of TypeScript is Anders Hejlsberg, which is the brother of Thomas Hejlsberg, a guy you probably know as one of the architects behind NAV. So if that was maybe a bit quick, or you didn't get all the details, then don't worry, we'll just use it as is. But I wanted to give you some kind of background to understand what we're doing, and if you come across those terms, then you'll understand how we are going to do this. But with that, we jump right into it. I've already installed Node.js and NPM with that, and then we're going to start from there. Installing it is quite easy. open Node.js as well, so you can see the installer is right on the front page. You can just download that one. And then for Yeoman, you can see here how you can install this. So this is really very easy. It takes a couple of minutes, but then it just runs. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open a Node.js prompt. I'm changing to a place where I want to generate this, creating a folder, and then I'm calling the code generator. It's kind of irritating or difficult to understand because it's just called code and it's generating code for VS Code. Maybe they could have named it VS Code, but that's just the way it is. You call it, and then after some initialization, you can see here, now it asks us, what do you want to generate? We're going to generate an extension based on TypeScript. We could also create one based on JavaScript. We could create a color theme, language support, code snippets, an extension pack. But yeah, the scope today is an extension, so I'm going to use the TypeScript extension. I'm going to name it. We are in a Nav Skills webcast, and it's 2017, the 1st of August. I keep the identity as is. You can see it's just lowercasing it and replacing the blanks. Okay. The description is something that you just enter. And then it asks me for a publisher name. I already have one in place. So it's offering me to use Fenster, but there's also a good description that I'll show you later how to create that one. And I also want to initialize a Git repository, which means that I get a local repository. I'll talk about that a bit later also, but this allows us to track the changes that we're making to the generated code. And with that, it generates the files, and then it runs npm install to get the dependencies. That means that in order to build and run a VS Code extension, you need some additional packages. Those are just downloaded and installed by npm, and I'll show you later we have in a folder called Node Modules where we have all that code inside it. If an update happens, you can just do an npm update and you get the new packages if they aren't referenced as exactly that version that you need. So this is just downloading stuff and extracting it to my disk. And you don't have to worry about picking the right ones, making sure you have everything in place, because this is just what Yeoman generates for you. So here we are, it's done. And I can put the first green check mark behind step 1. We have generated the basic code. We already had the prereqs in place, but those are easy to install and did a simple Yo code. Now what we want to do is to add the actual code, but I want to tell you a bit more about what we just generated. We have a launch JSON file in VS Code, which some of you might know if you've been working with VS Code for AL as well, because this configures how you launch the project that you currently have open in VS Code. So in our scenario, this is configuring how we want to launch our extension, and maybe the test for this or a debug scenario or whatever, but this kind of defines what happens with your extension if you press run or debug in the VS Code environment. Then we have a Readme file. This obviously is only a Readme file, but the interesting thing there is if you are going to publish your extension on the marketplace, then this Readme is going to be shown as the first page of your extension. So you better don't put anything stupid in there. Then we also have the extension.js file inside the source folder. This is where the actual source code will go. You can add additional JS files, but as my extension is quite simple, that's going to be just code inside of that file. Then we have the node modules, as I just mentioned. This is where the other modules which npm is downloading and installing are stored. And then we have the test folder, where you put the source code for testing the extension. I absolutely agree that you usually should do code test first, or at least add some automated testing in the end. But because the extension is so simple, I actually won't show you anything in there, but this is the place to use. Then there's the out folder. For those of you using Visual Studio, this is kind of similar of what the bin folder in Visual Studio projects usually is. If we finish compiling our extension, then the output is going to be stored in the out folder. And last but not least, there's the package.json file, a manifest file which describes our application, the name, the author, the version, and also the capabilities and dependencies, which we'll go into now. Okay, so we're just going to do this. The generator tells us what to do. I just copy that one and paste it in here and start VS Code by saying code dot. Now it should be a bit bigger. And you can see we are inside our NuskSkills webcast folder. You see the files a bit more than I've told you about. You see the node modules where all the modules are stored. NPM is rather granular, so the modules are usually quite small. So you need a lot of those. And then we have the source code with the actual extension file. But first of all, I'll just use it as is. You can see here, without knowing too much what is happening, that we will be shown an information message, hello world. And as this is the use case for developers, always, I'm going to run that one. As you can see below here, it compiled and it ran. And here you can see the first interesting thing. As we are developing a Visual Studio Code extension, a new instance of Visual Studio Code is opening. It's called an extension development host, as you can see in the top left. I hope you can read it. So this is the environment where our newly built extension is actually running. If we enter something like console log, which is debug logging, then this shows in the Visual Studio Code instance where we are actually developing. And the output and the extension itself is showing in the extension development host. This is a bit difficult to start because it's the same icon in the taskbar and it looks kind of the same, but you get the hang of that. So just to prove that we actually have something, there's that hello world action that wasn't before there. And you can see now we have hello world. And that console log, congratulations, and so on, is shown here in the debug console of our development environment. With that, I'm going to stop it because we're going to add the actual code. But what I want to do first is also to add an initial commit for my Git repository. So we have kind of a baseline where we started, and then later on we're going to see what we changed. Okay, first of all, I want to change the import. And what I show you here are VS Code snippets. As you can see, this is a user snippet. So something that I've defined. This is very useful for demo scenarios like we have now, but also very useful in actual coding. Microsoft is delivering some of those inside the AL extension of standard snippets. I think there's a MVP repository for snippets as well. That you can just use, and you can create your own ones. And what I'm doing here is, because I'm not a friend of importing everything, I'm just importing the things that we need. And then I'm going to reference another library that we want to use, because we also want to be able to just run the object that we currently have selected later on to our extension. We need something that allows us to open a browser and navigate to a URL. So for that, we're going to use a package that is called OPN. This is an additional dependency. So we have to track that in the package.json file as well. And you can see here, those are the dependencies that we need during the development time. And we also have the dependencies that we need during runtime, which are here. And with that, we tell it we want to use OPN. And and we want to use it in a version 4.02 and up. You don't have to worry about that when it gets deployed. So if you're gonna later maybe to download that one and use it, then it's automatically downloading this. But during the development time, you need to take care of that yourself. So we're going back to the Node.js prompt and just tell it to install OPN. And with that, it's trying to find OPN, maybe dependencies that OPN itself has. And now, as you can see here, it's downloaded OPN and a dependency that's called object assign. And that should also be in the Node modules folder now. It actually isn't, because I need to refresh. And here we are with our OPN package. Okay, so with that in place, we have everything that we need, and we're going to do the actual coding. I'm going to introduce a small class, which I called AL runner, because this is what my usual extension is called. And what that one is doing, as you can see here, it runs an object on a given line, which is a line of code in the editor. So it gets as input a line parameter and a publish parameter. But that publish parameter, we also define if we want to actually publish the Visual Studio code or later on AL code to NAV and then run it, or if we just want to run the object itself. And what we're doing here is we're checking if we get anything in that line, then we are converting it to lowercase to make sure we don't have any case problems. We currently can only handle pages in reports, so we are checking for that as well. And if it's a report, we can't publish. I'll explain later why, so we're going to have an error message here as well. And then we are going to split that line, and what that does is, I'll show you here. I have a Hello World example that I use later. The idea is that we're going to get a line like this, and we're going to split it. So the first item is going to be page, the second item is going to be the ID, and the third item is going to be the name. So this is what is in our area tokens. And then I'm checking if I actually got an ID where I want to have it. If not, I throw in an error message as well. And if I have it, then I am, for the first time, working with the integrated workspace. And I'm trying to get a configuration. What that means is that it searches inside the project, in my case now the AL project, if it finds a configuration which is called a launch configuration, and this is what it looks like. So after that code, we now have access to that launch configuration, and what we're going to do is we're just going to change that startup object ID and call the standard AL command that allows us to publish and run an object. So as you can see here, we are just changing the startup object ID. We are updating the configuration. You can see then later that actually the launch JSON file is changed with that, and we use the standard AL publish command to just run. What you can see here is that we can reuse things like the standard configurations, as you can see here, and that you can also use commands that are already available through maybe another extension like here, because AL actually is an extension itself, or something that Visual Studio Code offers as a standard command. You can just call those. If we don't want to publish or just run an object, it's a bit more complicated. We again are accessing the configuration, are getting the server and the server instance. So inside our AL project, this would be this line and that line. You can also define a different port, but I didn't implement that. And I'm checking if I have a page or a report, and then I'm just generating the URL that I need to with the server instance, the web client. As you can see here, I'm always opening the standard web client. I could also open the phone or the tablet client, but that's also something that I didn't implement yet. And then I just add the object type, page or report, and then the token number 1, which is the one with the idea. If we didn't find anything, then we're going to throw an error message as well. Okay, that's just the code. I hope, or I think that you probably could follow that, because it's not too difficult, but actually it's not the main point of the webcast, because this should mainly be about the tooling around it. So now we have the main code. What we now need is exactly one command or one method per command that we're going to use later on. For that, I again use a snippet. And we now have four functions. One that's running a selection, one that's running the first object in the file, because I soon recognized that if you are somewhere down the file, you might maybe want to run sorry, you maybe want to run just sorry, you want to run whatever is on the first line. And then we also allow to do the same thing to publish and run. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to publish and run. So what this does, it gets the currently selected line, so we can access the editor and we can access the document that is inside the editor, and we can get a line at any position. And as we want to get the currently active line, we use editor.selection.active.line, which returns the currently active line. As you can see, if I hover over this, I get quite some documentation. So oftentimes you don't have to look into any documentation in the web or in a browser, but you can just use the included documentation in the mouse overs. And then we're going to run our run object on line method, and are parsing in the line, telling it false because we don't want to publish, or in that case we are selecting the first line and again are calling it with that line, and false because we don't publish. And then we have the two publish methods, which are working kind of similar, only they are adding true as parameters, so they are publishing. Okay, with that in place, we have the actual code. And as you maybe saw, as we run the hello world example, the congratulations, your extension is now active appeared only after we called the hello world action. This is caused because VS Code is loading extensions lazily. That means that although you might have an extension in place, this doesn't get loaded if you just start VS Code, but it's loaded at some defined points. And that point in that case was when the command was called. So the initialization is not happening during startup because you might have a lot of extensions in VS Code. For example, you could have a PHP extension and you also have an AL extension. And if you're developing PHP, then you don't need the AL extension and the other way around. So what Visual Studio Code does, it allows you to take that into consideration and only load that extension as soon as you need it. That leads to quite a fast startup time for Visual Studio Code and also smooth runtime because it's not using as much memory as, for example, Visual Studio or other bigger IDEs. So we have a extension, a function that is called activate, and this is called as soon as our extension is going to get activated. I am going to replace that whole code with something that we have, and I have to remove that one because we did the import differently. And with that, as soon as it's activated, I'm also showing that debug message, and then we are registering commands. So we tell it that we want to register a command called run selection, run first object, publish and run selection, and publish and run first object. We are telling it what to do then. This is now calling the code that we just defined in each and every of those cases. And then we are pushing it into the so-called subscriptions, which means that we are making sure that VS Code knows what we are offering. What we don't have only to define the code for that, we also have to define it in the package.json file. And you can see here that we have something called activation events. This defines when our extension is going to get activated. and I'm replacing this with those 4 lines. This means whenever one of our commands is going to get run, then the activation takes place and the code is initialized, and VS Code then runs exactly what we want to run. Also, we need to make sure that the commands are in here. This is what in VS Code is called contributes. I'll show you why. Because we are contributing a list of commands. You have the command. This maps to those and also maps to those. So you have to make sure that you don't have any typos in there. And we're also adding some key bindings where you can enter for every command a key binding, also on a Mac or on all other environments, and it tells you that this is only happening if the editor is in focus. So if I'm somewhere else in VS Code and I'm pressing my key binding, it's not going to happen, but if I'm inside the editor, then my code is going to get called. So with that, we are finished, and I am pressing F5 again. Our extension is built and deployed. And because I already opened my Hello World project, it's not opening. I close it here, and I'm opening it inside our environment. Actually, we have it here. So we now have the Hello World. We have the launch JSON, which configures the server and the server instance, but also the startup object ID. And then now go to Hello World AL. I'm in the first line, and I'm calling our AL runner publish and run selection. Then this is going to publish and is going to open a browser at the place where we want it to. So this is opening, and it's running the My Customers page, which is the one that I've defined here, as you can see. And it also is a very, very simple list with only the name, because I've only defined the name in here. And as I said, the launch JSON file actually gets changed. We had 22 before, and now we have that ID in here. And just to show you that it works, I can also, now I'm in this line, I can also do AL runner, run the object in the first line, and then this is not publishing, it's just opening that page again that we've opened here. Okay, with that, I switch back here, and we've done the actual extension coding. Something that I forgot, if you have any questions, as Mark already said, just put them in the chat box and Mark will interrupt me if necessary or if it makes sense there. We also have some time in the end, but if you feel you have to answer, or you have a question that makes sense answering right now, then just enter it. The coding is done. Now we would need to create a private access token. This is something that's not too interesting, and as we are limited to 1 hour, I decided not to show you this, but this is really a step-by-step documentation on the web. The link you will also get. You have those little right arrows here, so you really know what you need to do in here, and it really is very easy to do this. You need a Visual Studio Online account to make sure that you can publish to the marketplace, but aside from that, this is really quite easy. So we assume that we've already done this, as is the case for me, and now we're going to publish the extension through a tool called VSCE. As I said before, the Readme MD file is going to show up in the marketplace as the first page. So it checks if the Readme file was changed. If we would just run, let me close all this. If we just run the publishing now, then it would tell us that we need to change the README to save us time. I'm just opening the README here, README, and remove everything. and just create some description in here. Usually when you use VSTE the first time, you need to log in. I'm already logged in, and you have to understand that publish really happens immediately. As you'll see, we're going to run publish, and then if you want to open your own VS Code, you can see it. If you want to run the marketplace in the browser, you can see it immediately, and I'm also going to show you. So what we need to do is we open our Node.js prompt, and we just enter VSTE publish to publish our extension. This is then compiling. There's a pre-compilation or a pre-publish script. It's compiling and then it's publishing, as you are hopefully going to see soon. As you can see in my screenshot below, it also notifies you if there's a new version. Yes, you can see here, there's again a new version, 130, and I'm currently at 129. But we already have our enough skills extension in place. So if we now go to the marketplace, I click on that link here, but you can do so yourself, and search for enough skills. Then we get that extension that we just generated. And once again, it's not working in the Internet Explorer, so I'm going to use Chrome because it's working there. And it should show you, here we are. We actually have one install, so hopefully one of you already was able to install our extension. And you can see that we have added that Readme file right there. Okay. With that, we've published it. Now we're going to use it directly in Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code brings its own search field for the marketplace, so we can just easily search in there, and then we need to install and reload, as I'll show you. For that, I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio Code, but open a new window. And open my AL project. Because this is now not the development environment and not the extension host, this one doesn't know about my extension yet. But if I go to extensions, you can see here, those are the installed extensions, the AL one, PowerShell, and some XML tooling. And if I now search for NAV skills, then I think I wrote it like this. Yeah, we have it here. I can install again, and it's downloading. It would download the dependencies if needed, and then we reload. This means that it's closing and reopening. And now we once again have, as you can see here, our AL runner commands that we can use. If I go back to the marketplace, then I should see at least 2 installs. Okay, actually 3, so I guess 2 of you were successful installing our extension. Okay. So with that, I think I showed you how we can go from the basic idea through all the tooling, the generating of the code, the actual coding, through the publish until we can run our extension through the marketplace and use it inside of VS Code. I want to add some links in here. The documentation about extending Visual Studio Code is very good, in my opinion. If you go to that URL, you'll find a lot of the steps that I've showed you, and then also a lot of additional information where you can understand more what is actually happening. And then I recommend to go to that GitHub repository by Microsoft and search for VS Code, because you have a lot of samples in there, you have a lot of actual extensions, and you have VS Code itself, because Visual Studio Code is an open source project as well. The documents that you need, and then you have a lot of extensions already in place, so you can look into that and understand how maybe Microsoft are doing their extensions themselves. If you want to give my extension a try, it's also on the marketplace. It's called AL Runner, and you can also reference the source code on GitHub. You can create issues there if something's not working, or if you have ideas how we maybe could extend it. I will also would be very happy to see some discussion around that. And then if you're interested, there's my blog, navblog.informa.de. That URL might change soon, but currently it's there, where I'm blogging a bit about that extension, about NAV, about AL, and also about something called Docker, Windows containers, if you're interested in that topic as well. Okay, that should wrap it up. Oh, something that I wanted to go through, sorry, is if I go back to my, that's the wrong one. If I go back to my project, then I can see that we've only changed 3 files. And because of the versioning environment inside VS Code, we can easily see what we've actually done. So just to recap, we had those activation events that we replaced with our 4 activation events. We had those contributes where we added our commands and added, make that a bit bigger, and added our key bindings for our commands. And then we added a dependency for OPN to make sure that we can enter or open a browser window. Then we have the actual extension code where we change the import and the requirement. Then to go through it in the way that we created it, we had our run object online method. We have all the methods that are called when a command is called. And then we had the registration, which is inside of the activate method. But as you can see, that's not too much code. It's also not doing too much, but it's quite easy to get this up and running. So I'm going to commit that as well. And we are done here. Okay. With that, I am done. I would be open for questions, or we have a quarter of an hour. We could also go through what we need to do to publish this on GitHub, or we could do both if you have the time. But I'm going to ask Mark, are there any questions that we should tackle?
Yeah, so Tobias, first of all, thank you. It was very inspiring and very interesting to see what you did. I already installed the extensions, and so did one of the other attendees of the webinar. Okay. So far, we don't have any questions open in the question window. I'll give the audience a few moments before doing that. So one of the reasons why I was so curious myself of this topic is that actually a few years ago even I tried to extend the NAV compiler. It was an attempt that I did together with Vieco. What we wanted to do was we wanted to make the NAV compiler a bit smarter, that you could, for example, check if somebody creates a global variable or a local variable, if they use Hungarian notation, if they create a function name, if the function name contains a verb and a noun. Is this something that you can do with create as an extension? Can you get like the entire contents of an object and then write code against the object?
Yes, if you what we're doing here is we are getting the editor and the document, and then you would have to do some parsing of the document to find the actual object. I think that shouldn't be too difficult, as the code is or the syntax is not too difficult. But I would also be interested to see if we maybe get some extension points by the AL extension to do exactly that. Maybe we can access something there, but I haven't seen anything like that yet. But yeah, as this is work in progress, it might follow. But if Microsoft is providing nothing, then you always have the chance to take just all the content that you have in the currently open editor window and use that.
Okay.
So you can
you can do stuff like checking if a function has more than X number of lines, and you know, all the
Yeah.
stuff that we always talk about when we talk about clean code, right?
Yes. Yes. Interesting question would be, when are you going to check that? You could do this on every change or on every save. Then it would have to be quite fast. Or you could have an additional command that would allow you to check this on a given command.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Cool. Okay. I don't think we have any other. Okay, we have one question. Let me see if I can rephrase the question. Can you fix back the changed configuration to restore the default run object when you quit the VS Code?
Okay. You could do that because we are accessing the configuration here, and we are assigning that object ID. So what we would basically need to do would be to add something like this. And you can see, as you are probably used now with C-side, but not in the old C-side, you have code completion there as well. So we could store the old object ID, and then as soon as we are finished, we could then just put it back in. And that would then restore the one that was done before, and then we would need to update the configuration again.
Yeah. We have another question from Dimitri Gaston. Thanks for the great webinar, but can you give some examples on why you need to create your own VS Code extension for AL projects?
I think we just had two examples, but what Mark just said, and also the one here. I think we have to wait some weeks or months until the actual AL extension by Microsoft is done, and then we can see what it already offers. But I guess that there are some things that you might want to have that Microsoft isn't offering, and then you can have your own extension. If you look in the marketplace, you can see there are a lot of extensions, because sometimes it just happens that the company that actually creates the basis isn't fast enough or isn't doing things like you want them to do them, and then you can just create them yourselves because it's that easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a nerdy thing, I think, but you can, I mean, let's say that, for example, you currently use OMA, right, Object Manager, and you store stuff in a nav database. You can actually write an extension that will publish your AL source code back into an NAV database to use with OMA. I mean, all the things you want to do with your source code that, like in the past, people would write their own object designers and post them on Mebuso. It's kind of in that area. I think it's a nerdy thing that if you want to make VS Code more fancy. Yeah,
or if you have just repetitive things that you need to do because you're working in a company where this is like the process that needs to be followed or whatever, then you can just add your tooling to make sure that this is easier.
Yeah. So Dimitri is also asking, how does this reflect to packaging a navx file for app source? I don't think it even relates, right?
In a way it does. It is also creating a package and publishing it to a marketplace, to some public repository where you can get an application, but it's two completely different technologies, two completely different marketplaces. So the same idea, but different.
What surprises me, but that's kind of a side topic, but what surprises me is like how easy it is for anyone to create a VS Code extension on a marketplace. And if you compare that to how insanely hard it is to get your app published on AppSource for 365 Financials, it's kind of two extremes, right?
Yeah, so something that's similar, maybe if you want to run an extension or develop an extension where you want to earn money or get money for usage, then that's something that you have to build yourselves, which is something that's similar to the D365 extensions. And I've actually seen only very few extensions for VS Code which are paid ones.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other questions popping in.
Okay.
Yeah, we have one, of course. Can you make those extensions for VS Code private? Ah, okay. So can you keep it for yourself?
Yes.
Or for a close community?
Yeah. What we currently did is we did a VSCE publish, as you see here. What we can also do, I think it's VSCE pack. I'm not sure because I've never done it before. No, it's package.
Isn't this what Microsoft is doing now with the AL compiler? Because it's not on the marketplace yet; it's only on the virtual machine.
Yes, exactly. We're doing a VSCE package, and this should do the same that the publish does, but it's not actually publishing. It's just creating a file.
And then you can distribute that file or publish the file on Mebuso or something like that.
Now you get that VSIX file.
The VSIX file, yeah. The one that, right. Yeah. This is also the one that's in the demo folder of the virtual machine on Azure. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you can just use that and distribute it. I'm not sure if you can have something like a private marketplace. Never had the need and never investigated, but I've never read anything about that. Might be possible, but I don't know.
Okay. Can you make a demo package and then keep some stuff behind? I think someone is getting enthusiastic here. Can you just make something like a demo and then activate something for full usage? I think someone wants to make money on this.
Yeah, I guess you could. You would have to have some web service in place that you can call to find out if the user is licensed to do something. But in here you have the full TrueScript or TypeScript, or if you want JavaScript stack, and with that you can do whatever you want. So if you have an internet connection and you have a web service someplace that knows if a user is allowed to do it, then you could just call it and prevent them from doing whatever they need.
It's basically the same as self-monetizing nav apps, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure how good this is protected against decompilation. Never tried that, to be honest.
Oh, no. So we have one question. What language is this? So the language you were using?
Yeah, this is TypeScript.
Yeah.
Something like JavaScript, but with a number of object-oriented additions to it.
Is there anything that you have to keep in mind if you want to also support Mac? Well, first of all, I think we should mention that writing AL code is not yet supported on the Mac, so it's kind of weird to do it. But
yeah, but maybe you want to do something different.
Exactly.
Yeah, the only place where I came across that had different things for a Mac is that one, where because the keys are different, the keyboards are different. You have to have different keys or key sequences in here. But apart from that, I didn't come anything across Mac specific. But I don't have a Mac, and actually I've never tried to do this on a Mac, so I might be missing something, but nothing did jump out to me, or I didn't see anything in documentation yet.
Yeah, every now and then I have the feeling that people using Mac have different alphabets. Can you also use Python instead of TypeScript or JavaScript?
No, I think it's JavaScript or TypeScript only.
Yeah. Okay. So those questions are answered. Let's see if anything. Which extension key bindings will be active with two extensions having Control R? Ah, that's a good one.
What about if you do? Yeah, conflict. If you do something like this and the second extension gets activated, then you get an error message that you can't do this because that key binding is already used by someone else. Because of the very big marketplace and the big number of extensions, there's no automatic checking. You kind of need to find out what is happening, or if you get any conflicts with the usual extensions that are in place. With what I told you about lazy extension binding, that also means that if you have an extension in VS Code that is not activated and binding the same key, it's not a problem. Or let me revise that. No, I think the bindings are loaded in before because you can use them to activate. No, sorry, I was wrong on that. So if you load the extension, then you should get an error message that tells you that you have a problem. I can just...
So if there's a problem, can you change them into something that will work? Okay.
Yes, but you can't have an alternate key, at least not that I know of. I think that should allow us to have F5 in here. And if we now try to publish that, yes. Okay. Oh no, this is only the warning that we are overwriting an extension with another one. And yeah, okay. If we want to do run selection, yeah, no, this is a failed error. Sorry, I'm not sure ad hoc, but I've seen that error message that tells you that you are using something that is used by someone else, and then you have to handle that.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think we've answered all of them. That was quite a number of questions. Great. No, I think we are done with the questions. Yep.
Okay. So then maybe you could just put a quick answer in the chat if you want to see how we can get our code to GitHub, or if this is known or not of interest.
Yeah, let's just, okay, we have one that says show. Anyone else who wants Tobias to continue? Yes, we have 2.
Okay, then we just go.
How many do you need, Tobias? 1, 2, 3, 10?
Let's start with 2.
We have 5 now, so I think people want you to continue.
Okay. So then what I'm first of all going to do, I'm going to revert all the changes that we make here, because it's, as we've seen, not working, and I have the chance to just discard those.
Oh, that's great, right? That's people are going to love that with Git in the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's just the way you want it to work. Yeah. Okay, so to get back to that one, just a quick primer about GitHub. What we currently are having, as I said, is a local repository with no remote, as GitHub or Git actually is calling it. That doesn't make too much sense if you've worked with a centralized system like the Team Foundation one, or previously Visual Source Safe, or whatever that was called, or Subversion or CVS. But Git actually is a distributed version control system, which means that you have multiple repositories, and all of them, if they are in sync, have the full history of changes. So we currently have a local repository with all our changes, and if we push this to GitHub, then we're going to have an identical remote copy with all the history, as I'll show you soon. Pushing this to GitHub means that we need to have a GitHub account. They provide a public repository for free. We can have issue handling, we can add a wiki page, we can have so-called projects if we do bigger things, but they're not too much used, I think. And you also have paid GitHub versions where you can have private repositories. So if you want to share your code through GitHub, but not everyone to access it, you need to have a paid account, which is like $7 a month or something like that. And then you can have a private one as well. You can think of GitHub maybe something similar to what CodePlex or SourceForge were, or still are, if they are still alive. I don't know, actually. For the push to GitHub, we have to do something in Git, which is called, we add a remote. This is not directly supported by VS Code. VS Code has a rich GitHub integration, but add remote is not directly supported. But as we are in the extension webcast, I'll show you that we can easily just use an extension for that. But as we need to have a repository first, I'm going to go to GitHub in my repository, where you can see that I have already a number of repositories, which are either my own code, like the AL runner one, or forks of existing repositories, which means that you can use a repository that's already in place in GitHub and have kind of your own copy and change what you need to change. But now we want to add a new one. This is, as you can see, I've done this before, and I'm going to use my previous work. And now we can decide if we want to have this public or private. If I choose private, then it tells me I need a paid account. And I can do an initialization of the README, of the ignore, and of the license, but I already have my code, so I'm just creating an empty repository. This should be quite fast. And as you can see here, this would be what I need to do on the Git command line, but we're going to do this in VS Code through an extension, and I just copied the URL that I need to tell it where to store this. So I'm going to search in here for I want to add a remote, and I find one and just reload. And again, this downloaded the extension and now allows me to have git add remote. I name it origin, which is kind of the default for a remote. And I enter the URL that I want to push this to. So now it just knows that there is a remote origin at that place. And I still need to, what Git calls push changes to that. And I'm pushing, and it already knows that I have now one remote. I could have multiple remotes, and I could have multiple branches, but I just have that one. And then you can see the small blue one here. And we should also see some output here. Okay. And now we should have everything in place. So if I go back to my repository and the code, then you can see here that we now have the code in place that we just used. And as I said, this is sharing the full history. As you might remember, we did the initial commit, and then we did the commit when we finished. And now, although we created that repository only later, it already knows about the initial commit and about the first one. And we can see the changes in here as well. So if you want to look through that, let me make this a bit bigger. Then you can also see the changes here with the original version on the left and the new version on the right. Or you can also do a so-called unified, where you can just see the changes and the new addition, or what we deleted here in the new addition as well. So with that, we already have our code on GitHub. And what we can do now is in our package.json file, we add that repository. And now I need my URL again. So we have that URL in place. And if we now do a publish again, then you will see this shows up in the publish in the marketplace as well. What we can add here is we can do a minor, a major, or a fixed publishment. I'm going to do a minor publish, and this is going to increase my version number. So if we look into the package.json file now, then you can see that this has switched to 101 because we've published a minor version. And this is publishing right now. Okay, here we are. Now we go back to the marketplace. Let's see, where is it? We have it here. And now you can see if I reload that, and we actually have 5 installs. Okay, so some more succeeded. We also now have version 101. Let me make that one bigger as well. Version 101, and you have the project details where we have the repository. You can see that there are no pull requests, which is a way to add code if you want to add something to another repository. We have no open issues, and we had the last commit 22 minutes ago. This is all fetched automatically just because we added the repository inside of our package.json file. And if I click on that, then we are back in our repository, And then you can see here we have the issues, we have the pull requests if someone else wants to add code. You have settings, project and wiki, as I told you. You can also remove those through the settings if you only want to have issues and pull requests. Okay, so with that, I really am at the end of what I prepared. Are there maybe questions about the GitHub integration?
Well, while we are waiting for questions, first of all, thanks a lot for this webinar. It was really inspiring and gave me a jump start of what I want to see if I can make it work.
Yeah, it would really be interesting to see what all those people who are have waited to change the development environment, now they can, what they are going to do.
Yeah. I mean, in the past you would see, especially when we still had like the classic client where we had forms and everything in the same environment, people would make tools like by the millions, and half of it will end up at Mibuso, and some of them eventually ended up being commercial products like OMA. It's going to be really interesting to see what our community is going to do with this. Well, I don't see any questions, and we are 6 minutes over time, so without any further delay, I think I will close the webinar by thanking Tobias. Don't forget to register for next week's webinar with Waldo. Daniel will moderate that one, Daniel Remelsman, because I actually have to do a training. I have to teach in August, which has never happened before. So, thanks.
And if again, I want to add one final thing.
Sure.
I'll be speaking at Directions EMEA and at Tech Days about Docker. So if you want to drop by, I'm also happy to talk about the extension in GitHub and the marketplace if you want to, and also obviously if you're interested in Docker and that stuff.
Yep. Okay. Well, see you in Madrid and see you in Antwerp.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Tobias. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Rick.
And thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.